Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really great guest on today, and I'll describe him briefly. Previously at Walsh, he's a Brazilian graphic designer based in Brooklyn, New York. He's associate design director at Base, teacher at Aprender Design, and half of Anywhere. Please join me in welcoming Carlos Bocai. Welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much for having me here. So excited.
Are you ready for 20 questions?
Sure, let's do it.
Great. Question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
So as you said, I'm originally from Brazil. I went to school. I was born and raised in Rio. I went to school in Rio for design. Uh, and around 8 years ago, I moved to New York, and started my career here. I worked at a few places, as you mentioned, and I'm currently an associate design director at Base New York. For the last 5 years, I've been teaching a course about visual identities at Aprender Design. It started in Portuguese for a Brazilian audience, and then in the last 2 years, we expanded to a global audience. So now I also do it in English. And I occasionally do personal passion projects with my friend Julia Aguiar, who's based in Brazil, and we met during school, and that's what we call Anywhere. It's our creative practice. It's the way we found to keep collaborating together, even with the distance of me moving to New York and Julia remaining in Brazil. So I think that's what I do in a nutshell.
Great. And just a quick note for the audience, if you guys are interested in our early supporters, check out the episode with Debbie Millman. That was a great episode. Question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Uh, I think I'm a yes person, and I usually go for the things I want. And I actually tend to be very optimistic about things. Usually, when I start a new project or when I have a new goal in life, uh, and I set like a goal and a plan for it, uh, I tend to just go for it and expect the best.
Great, I love that. So question three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
It's a good question. I feel actually very fortunate to have known since I was a kid what I wanted to do. When I was 5, my parents say that when they would ask me what I wanted to do, I would say I wanted to work in the computer. So I was never the kid that had the crazy answers like astronaut or I don't know. I always kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do. Uh, and I think growing up in Rio, maybe there was a sense of comfort of the computer and the environment of that environment kind of brought me. I also had a cousin that was older at the time and had some kind of computer arts class in high school, and that introduced me a little bit to the world of graphic design, and I was fascinated by it. As a teenager, I was obsessed with making PowerPoints. Uh, I would make CD covers for my birthdays, and I'll give it to my friends. And I was really into that world of visuals. And I think, yeah, and then I think that led me to going to school for visual communications. And then in school, understanding more about the world of design and what design can be, and also more specifically graphic design. And I think that naturally brought me to branding, and what fascinates me about branding, which is what I believe it's my main uh, what I do right now, is the idea of bringing abstract concepts into life, going from intangible to tangible. Because I think, especially in corporate identities or when you're creating a brand, you're creating this set of values, and a visual identity is a translation of that into something visual. So that kind of bridge between the intangible and the tangible is something that really fascinates me, and I think that's why right now a branding designer.
Great. Some people struggle with number four, but the question is, what does your future look like?
That's a very hard question, and honestly, right now, I I would tell you no idea. And it's funny because up until around this point in my life, I always had a very clear answer for that. Uh, I used to be very much the kind of person that projects a lot. Uh, but I think I'm reaching a point where I'm trying to live in the moment and not project so much and just enjoy uh, what's happening right now. And what's happening right now, it's actually a lot of the things that a few years ago, it's what I was projecting, it's what I wanted in my future. So I don't know. Today, my answer to this question is I don't know, and it's actually a little uh, liberating to be able to say that.
Nice. The next question we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
I would say a lot. Uh, I think design is extremely influenced by context, and I think as a creative, everything that surrounds you or every experience you have contributes to your repertoire. So the place where you are and the people you're interacting and the atmosphere you're living, I think impacts a lot on me as a person and also me as a designer. When you think about even conceptually, concepts like street culture in New York, uh, you think more about like Helvetica, modernist design, but in Brazil it has a complete different. If you think about Rio de Janeiro, it has a completely different aesthetic. So the understanding of place and context, I think it's extremely important in everything I do as a creative.
Grade on six. If you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Um, I think to have a little bit more patience, give time for things to develop. Not everything needs to happen in my own time. I used to be very, I think it connects to what I was talking about before, the idea of planning a lot and projecting a lot.
Mm.
I wanted a timeline and I would try to make things happen in that timeline. And today I feel like things could have happened a little bit more fluidly and it wouldn't be an issue. But at the same time, I also think that impatience a little bit gave me a sense of urgency to chase what I wanted and to try to make things happen. And it also ended up helping in my career. But I think there is a positive and a negative, but in general, I would just, yeah, I could have been more patient.
Great. And what's a day in your life like?
Uh, it depends, but I would say mostly wake up, go to work or work from home. At days we are uh, in a hybrid mode, so there's a few days from work from home and a few days from the office. Uh, Depends on what stage of project I'm working on. Uh, Sometimes there's more uh, hands-on, like sketching and designing. Sometimes there's a lot of meetings and conversations about a project. Sometimes there's a lot of planning or presentation making. I feel like as a design director, also, you recently have been getting more involved into a more managing aspect and planning uh, of a project. So all of that also exists within my world as a designer, but I also design. So the balance between those things. Uh, I tried to be active, so I've been trying to go to the gym more often. Uh, when I'm home, I like to be also present in my personal time. So yeah, I like to cook with my partner, and I also need some mindless time to recharge. So usually, before going to bed, I like to watch something mindless, like a reality TV show, like Love is Blind or Real Housewives or Big Brother Brazil, like something that is very easy to the brain, just so I can recharge my energy.
Nice, I like that. So eight is around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Yeah, it's hard. I I feel like there's a lot of ways. I think meeting people is something that, in a way, feeds me with information. And in every setting, it could be at work, it could be on the streets, it could be at a party. Just the idea of connecting with people, I think New York concentrates a lot of really interesting people from very multicultural backgrounds, and I really enjoy that. And yeah, hearing people talking about something they're really passionate about, but also, of course, like news portals, and I look at a lot of websites in Brazil and also in the US, trying to keep up with what's happening. Politics has been a little depressing recently, so uh, in a way, also disassociating from it. Uh, but I don't think like no one is up to date about everything. And honestly, it can feel a little exhausting sometimes. You know, we are bombarded with so much information. There's so many good newsletters, subtracks, podcasts, Instagram posts, blogs. Uh, I mean, there's so many people creating so much content that it can feel a little overwhelming. So I try to feed myself with information, and I think that's very important uh, to me as a designer and as a person. But at the same time, I try not to put too much pressure on myself. And honestly, sometimes I just need less information uh, than, yeah. So it's trying a little bit of both, giving myself a break, but at the same time, uh, trying to absorb as much as I can.
Great. So nine is about tools. Do you use both digital and analog tools?
Yes, but yeah, when I was in school, for example, or even before, I I I started design school. So my one of my biggest concerns was the fact that I was not really that much into drawing with my hands,
Hmm.
or I thought I was like bad at drawing. And then when I started to understand more about the world of design, I realized that there's not such thing as like bad at drawing. It's just being able to express yourself. So I mean, I would say I use analog tools mostly as like sometimes collage or uh, ways of using my lack of ability with my hands like purposefully to create something. Uh, but I would say a, a big part of my process happens digitally in softwares like I don't know, most of Adobe and Figma. But when we say the word tool, I think it's not only the visual part of it. I believe one of the biggest parts of the design process, my design process, is full of words. There's a big verbal aspect of the design process. So I think words are actually uh, a tool that I use a lot. I'm always trying to attach meaning to what I'm doing, intention to my decisions, and I think defining words really help to start to make something a little bit more tangible and defining whatever is the message that I'm trying to communicate, whatever is the perception I'm trying to create with what I'm doing.
Great. And halfway, number 10, how do you deal with work-life balance?
That's actually a very important topic to me. I I believe in a fluid relationship between work and personal life,
Hmm.
being able to navigate both in a fluid and healthy way. And I think in order to be creative, it's extremely important to have experiences beyond work. A lot of time it's outside of the office, the workspace, or while you're actively working, where an insight or idea happen. It could be in a completely unrelated moment. Sometimes, like I have had ideas for projects by watching a show that said something that in a way connected to what I was doing, or having a conversation with a friend about a topic that is unrelated, but maybe there was a connection in something that my brain was already working on. I think as designers, we're always connecting dots. So it's important to immerse yourself in different things and in the subject of the project, of course, but also expose yourself to other things to be able to connect those dots. So, and I think work is a definitely a big part of my life, but it's not all of it. You know, I try to draw boundaries, which actually encourages me to be as productive as possible while I'm working and get things done. So yeah, it's just trying to find this balance between both and not have one uh, be an issue or a problem to the other. And I love working, but I don't like overworking. And I don't think people are at their best creatively when they resent work, when they are not uh, excited, or when they are uh, annoyed about work, you know. So as a design director, uh, and right now more involved into mentoring and managing other people, that's a mentality I try to encourage as much as possible. I believe that happy, well-balanced people perform better. So I think it's a benefit for everyone. Uh, and I try to show respect to their time because I don't think anyone that is close to burnout or hates what they're doing or hates the fact that they're working right now is able to be their best creative self. And that's something that I've been trying to apply into my work approach as much as I can.
Nice, good. So number 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
That's a good question. And it's a hard answer because, as I told you, I think since I was very young, it was all about the computer, like the idea of I, that surrounds professions around that, right? So I think I would probably, and I actually considered that at some point, be doing something related to design, like advertising, or I had a phase that I was really into visual effects for movies before I found more about branding.
Hmm.
Uh, but also, I was having this conversation with a coworker a few weeks ago, and they told me that they have a friend that have a job that is actually fascinating, and I would love to have. It's someone that travel to destinations to test them for big companies to help them choose spots for employee retreats.
Hmm.
So yeah, that sounds fun.
Hmm. What would you not like to do with your career?
A meaningless job, I think. Something that is very repetitive, extremely labor intensive, very physical. Uh, yeah, I think it's almost, I don't know, the opposite of
Hmm.
what I do right now. And I think that's something that every time when I considered what I wanted to do, those were the things that I did not want to do.
Great. And number 13, do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Uh, there's a few, but one thing that I tell myself a lot is that no feeling is forever.
Hmm.
And from a positive and a negative side, I think from a positive side is if something good is happening, it's knowing that that can go away and that feeling can go away. the feeling of landing your dream job is something that feels so special, and but that goes away. That just becomes your job at some point. So cherishing those moments and making sure that like you you realize that that's happening, because you know that that feeling is gonna it's going to pass. But at the same time, when something bad is happening, also knowing that it's gonna go away and it's not gonna be forever. And I think having experiences that have shown me that maybe sometimes feels like it's so intense and it's so deep and it's not gonna go away, that pain or that feeling. And now seeing that it passed, and we adapt and we get over things. So yeah, and even when when I woke up with a terrible hangover, I also tell myself that I know it's gonna go away.
Hmm. Do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Least favorite's a little strong, but I don't know, it might be a little controversial, but there is this sentence that a lot of people love, which is find a job you love and you never have to work a day in your life.
Hmm.
And I question that a little bit because I'm a little against romanticizing things like this. I think work is work, and the moment that you put it in a way in the way that this quote presents it, it starts to blur too much those worlds, and it can be a little confusing and open space for misunderstandings. Uh, and yeah, work is it's still work. I of course love what I do. I'm very passionate about design, and I think if I'm in New York right now, it's because of design. Uh, but it's still work.
Hmm. So you're choosing one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
That's a very hard question. Uh, and there's so many parts of me, and that could be, I don't know, that I could choose specific words. But I think driven, and I don't know, it's like I have a friend who's also a designer, Gabriella Nami, and she always says like you were such like a go-getter in your career, and being in New York, and I think there's a little bit of that sense of, and I've had big dreams in my life. As a design student in Brazil, things felt so far from my reality a lot of times, and yeah, and I think I was driven to achieve my goals.
Great. And what keeps you up at night?
A lot of things. I think the growth of the far right in the world is something that worries me a lot. LGBTQ rights being threatened, the way immigrants are being treated. Yeah, there's a lot happening that really worries me in that sense. And also, I think in a way connected to that, uh, how AI is creating almost like a post-truth world where it's becoming extremely difficult to fact check, and more narratives are created and believed. Uh, and I think considering a world where narratives, the way information is uh, travels, right, and moves around, and how it's all based on narratives. Uh, the idea of truth or something being real is more and more challenged with generative uh, images and deep fakes and all of that. So I think actually the what I said first, and the idea of the AI creating this. post-truth reality. I think those two things are connected. And I mean, I'm not a pessimist fully against AI. I think there's a lot of positives coming from it, but yeah, I think there's definitely this negative side.
Great. And final stretch here. What's a dream you're chasing?
Um, I think some kind of perfect balance that doesn't exist,
Hmm.
more philosophically. And I don't know, for whoever believes in astrology, I'm a Libra. I'm actually a double Libra. My rising is also Libra, which the symbol of Libra is a scale. It's all about balance. And I think I'm constantly weighing decisions, thinking about possibilities, trying to find the right answer to make everything in harmony. But in the end of the day, that's almost like an utopia. But I think unconsciously, that's what I'm pursuing in my life, finding that balance. And in the last philosophical answer, also eating 150 grams of protein a day, which apparently it's important for a bunch of health reasons and muscle growth and fat loss and all of that. And it's harder than it seems.
Hmm. What inspires you?
So many things. Uh, I think my friends and I I'm fortunate to have a community here in New York. When you leave your country, your friends almost become your family. Uh, and I'm fortunate to have a community here that is also extremely creative. My closest friends are Brazilian designers that are brilliant, and I think them and being around them and seeing their success and growth inspires me a lot. Also, New York, uh, I try not to take for granted being in New York, uh, because it's a city that concentrates so much creativity and uh, visual information that also inspires me. I think traveling definitely is something that inspires me a lot. More recently, being with my students, getting to know their repertoires, their visual background, their experiences also uh, inspires me and refreshes my perspectives. And more specifically, I'm also a little obsessed with Brazilian visual poetry. There's two people that I really admire the work, Augusto de Campos and Vladimir Dias Pino. The way they work with typography and to create meaning and to tell a story, I think is super interesting.
Nice. And last couple here, number 19. Any advice you'd like to share?
It's something that I heard when I was in school in Brazil. In Portuguese, it's something like o não você já tem, which means there's not a direct translation to English, but the idea is that the no you already have, but you can try to get a yes. And it's a reminder that if you don't ask or try, you never create the possibility of something happening.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's like trying thing, and sometimes it's gonna be frustrating. Sometimes you're gonna have a no. Sometimes you're probably not gonna get an answer, but that feeling of trying is something that uh, I I advise to everyone, especially young creatives starting their career.
Great. And finally, number 20. How can our listeners keep tabs on you and what's our call to action?
Uh, okay, my Instagram, you can find me on Instagram, Carlos Bocai. Uh, and yeah, and there's also you can find there my website with my email. You can feel free to reach out. It might take a little bit. Uh, to answer. Sometimes it's super quick, sometimes it can take a little time, but I always try to answer. And if you're interested in Brazilian design, I also currently run a page called bonde.br on Instagram, which is about celebrating Brazilian visual culture. It was started by Leopoldo and Felipe Rocha from Porto Rocha a few years ago, and then more recently, me and Julia, who also teaches with me, we've been running the page. So if you're interested in Brazilian design, you can find a lot of really interesting stuff there.
Awesome. Well, I feel like this was a long time coming, and it's always great to connect Vancouver with New York. So, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me, Thomas. It was a pleasure.